Hello everyone. So now we're gonna wait for Mai to come online and then we will start. Hope that everyone is doing well. Hold on, we'll just wait for her to come in and then we will start. Alright. Hold on. Hold on, Mai. It seems like I'm unable to get you. Hold on. It seems you are unable to join. Oh, okay. I think what happens is, let me see. Hold on, everybody. Let me see if I can get Mai. If not, we will. Hold on, So now we're waiting, and we'll see how it goes. Everyone. Hello.
Hi. Oh, I'm not sure what that was about. I tried to actually join you on my laptop, and then that didn't seem to be working, so I switched to my phone. So here I am.
Oh, no worries. Thank you. How are you? In these crazy times, how are you?
I am doing well, thank you. We've actually, a lot of adjustments during this period for everyone. So for us, we shifted a lot of our focus to our online offerings as far as education, for sure. And with regards to my personal practice, well, during the times where, there was confinement, we were able to do a lot of rehab online as well. Right now in Canada, we're okay. Gyms are still open. The clinics are still open. We're still seeing clients. We're still treating people. Courses is a different story because now, we can't have gatherings. So that's going to change things for the next 4 weeks or so.
Mm. Okay. Yeah, I think almost like Singapore and Canada are kind of pretty similar in the sense, the gyms are open. You can do a lot of stuff. They're just limited to maybe 5 people in a group setting.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah,
So I
the
guess,
gyms here have to have a layout where people can be 2 meters apart during the group training. So depending on how much space you have, a lot of the gyms are still able to get, 12 to 16 people in their group courses if they're able to lay out the space to do that. For us, for education, it's a different story because people have to be, seated together and then working on each other. But
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I can see that it's going to be a big change until the vaccine is found,
Yep.
going to be a issue with regards to holding live events.
Yeah, for sure. Our plan was to be in Asia this year. So now the plan is to be there next April. So April 2021, if all goes well, we plan to be there.
So I guess before we start, can I get you to introduce yourself and then how did Rehab U come about?
Yeah, well, I'm Mei Lin Doban. I am a certified athletic therapist in Canada. Rehab U came about initially, it was just my own practice, really. So my own personal or private practice from a clinical point of view, which, has always been very training oriented. You know, so when we say rehab is training, that's kind of what I mean, and we can talk about that as well a little bit later. So initially, that's what Rehab U was, and then I tied in education to that because I've always taught. When I finished my bachelor's degree in exercise science, well, I, taught in the department. I taught labs. I taught. Eventually taught a course. I've had other business endeavors where we created education for trainers. So education on various topics like functional training, rehab integrated functional training. So, education has always been part of what I love to do. So, I created courses again when I started Rehab U so that I could continue to pursue that education business endeavor. And it really took off a lot faster than we had anticipated, to be honest. Yeah.
So like I mean, because like 2 years ago, yeah, 2 years ago is when I first saw you at the Swiss event, right? 2018. Yeah.
Yes.
So like,
yeah.
Are you gonna have your own topic next year since everything's pushed back to next year?
I certainly hope so. I was supposed to this year at Swiss, which was supposed to be in October of this year, and I was presenting my own session there. So
Yeah.
it's been postponed, and so I'm assuming that yes, I will be presenting at the next one. Don't know what the topic will be yet, but yeah.
Awesome. So I get to see you next.
Absolutely.
All right. So okay, so let's go into more like so Rehab U. So I mean like apart from the education element, so seeing how does rehab or like the training aspect and rehab pair along?
Yeah, a lot more than a lot more than people might think, and not a lot more than what I think is currently being exploited. Right? For me, obviously manual therapy is an important part of a rehab process, but that's the key word, is it's only part of the process, right? And it's an important part of the process because it will have an effect, an effect on the client's pain experience. It will have an effect on potential motor adaptation to pain, because if we move with pain for a very long time, or even fairly short periods of time, there are going to be motor adaptations to that. There are going to be compensations to that occur very, very quickly. So, treating the pain via, for example, various manual therapy is important, but that's not going to create, an adaptation in the tissues that we're trying to bring back to, performance, or we're trying to take, for example, an injured tissue and increase its tolerance back to, I can now get back to performance. And we know what creates tissue adaptations for performance, and that's training. So, a huge part of the rehab process has to be, how do I treat my tissue? How do I address my tissue via, how do I treat the pain via therapy? How do I address the tissue via very specific reactivation or therapeutic exercises for that tissue or that region, that area? And then how do I continue to load someone? How do I ensure that there's strength in the continuum of care so that people don't become underloaded, and so that the tissue, the specific tissue or the specific region, I can start to progressively load it? Because if I only do the therapy and then protect the tissue by, changing the exercises that I do and not doing X, Y, Z to protect the tissue, then when am I going to progressively overload that tissue to get it back to performance? I'm going to be missing that piece. So I'm going to get rid of my pain, and then eventually I'm going to say, okay, well, now that I don't have the pain anymore for, a fairly consistent amount of time, I'm going to reintegrate those exercises that I had taken out. But as soon as I reintegrate those exercises will probably potentially exceed the tissue's tolerance. So I'm going to end up injured again. Or, I haven't addressed all of the fundamental movement that has changed because of the injury or because of the pain that I was moving around with. So there are so many factors to address. And the reality is that in the clinical setting, the therapists don't always have the time to do all of that, you know, and it depends what your clinical context is like. But if you're in a conventional clinic where you see patients every 30 minutes, you don't have time to build the rest of the structure. And someone needs to fill that gap, right? And that gap is training, really. It's integrating what the rehab needs are into a training structure so that we can make sure that we create adaptation, because we know that's what makes us more robust, more resilient.
I understand. So, yeah, so because it's like you always see like kind of like rehab is always sold as just like, I mean, like rehab by itself, and then training is kind of training by itself, and I guess that the issue is that there's no combination of them together in
Exactly.
single, like a provider in that sense.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you know, as far as providers, it's becoming more common that you have kind of hybrid trainers who are, you know, both a therapist and a trainer. Otherwise, you need collaboration, right? So you need a therapist who unfortunately doesn't have time to bridge that gap, to do the whole training aspect of it, but will do the manual therapy and the very specific therapeutic exercise portion. But then you'll need to collaborate with a trainer who understands injuries well enough to be able to modify the training, build a structure, and then integrate the therapist intervention and the therapeutic exercises into the structure.
Mm.
And that's effective because in reality, nobody has time to do both a rehab thing and then their training thing, you know, and most people, unfortunately, even when they're in pain, are going to say, well, if I do this, all of these, you know, therapeutic rehab exercises that my therapist gave me, I don't have time to train. So instead, I'm going to skip out on those a little bit, and I'm just going to do my training, and then that keeps them in that cycle, right? So the reality is that, unfortunately, people don't want to sacrifice the training time. But if you integrate it and you modify your training where they're still going to get a training effect, and they don't feel like they're losing out on their gains, then you get more compliance, right?
Mm. Yeah. I guess it's also in a similar scenario, like let's say for fitness, right? Like health doesn't sell as much as, you know, like 12-week transformations, you know, like I want to be healthy, like same like trying to sell a multivitamin, you're gonna need it for the rest of your life, like, oh, okay, like versus like I need a fat burner for 12 weeks, like, oh, okay, you know, 12, you know,
Yeah.
so like when people, since you've been doing it for a while, like I guess like the trainers that probably come to you are not so much pure bodybuilding because they won't be too interested in that, I guess. Like how's the
Um, you mean who the audience is, really?
or like yeah, or what kind of like from doing it, like what kind of trainers come to you, and like what have you seen, like kind of like mistakes that they always been the usual trainer mistakes of for trying to help people in the rehab sense, I guess.
Yeah. Um, I think that, well, most of the trainers that come, for example, to the courses are obviously trainers who are interested in the rehab aspect because they're working, and truth be told, most trainers are working with the general population, right? Like most trainers are not working with just elite athletes and just, you know, so they don't have the perfect circumstances of being able to collaborate with, you know, other specialists and things like that. So they're coming because they have so many clients who have shoulder pain and low back pain, and they kind of just are not sure what to do or are not confident in, you know, intervening, right? So I guess one mistake that I do see is, you know, not going out and getting that education that will help you manage that. The other mistake that I see is also on the other side of the coin is thinking that you can do it all by yourself, right? So in the courses, you know, we're always very careful to talk about scope of practice. That being said, for me, a trainer has a very important role to play in the rehab process because of everything we've just talked about, because of the fact that there needs to be a structure within the training plan that can rebuild tolerance, rebuild capacity, right? And the trainer is very much able to do that if they have the right education and the right collaborations with other people and other specialists. So there's the other mistake I see is the trainers wanting to do too much, right? So there's not having the confidence or not having gone out and gotten the right education to do better at managing these clients and providing them support, versus wanting to do it all.
So because I mean, especially now with the internet being like information overload, right? So like, where would you say is if let's say someone wants to find out more about, like, say, tap in their toes into like rehabish stuff like that, like what would be I mean, apart from your course, like where would be their first kind of like place to go to get more information or stuff like that?
Well, it's certainly not social media, right? Like social media is just like kind of a bridge where, it'll allow you to, and don't get me wrong, like we use social media to, provide education and, I'm sure you've been on the Instagram page and on the Facebook page. It's very much about sharing information and giving people practical stuff that they can really apply as much as possible, which is good. Because if you go on the blog and you read an article, you usually can get something out of it that you can like, oh, like I can identify at least one client that I could apply this to. And that's interesting. But of course I speak for my own social media, but as we know, there's also stuff on social media that makes no sense, right? So it's a bit of a, it's a bit of it can be advantageous or not. I think the first step, if you want to help people, if you're interested in helping people who are, dealing with painful syndromes or dealing with injuries, is, as I said, to find the right courses, the right educational courses that can help you gain more knowledge about injuries, injury mechanisms, what are the specific contraindications for certain injuries, what you need to assess as a trainer, like what information is it that you need as a trainer to adjust the program, and do what you do, which is periodize so that someone can get stronger, so to speak.
And since you talk about like a lot rehab-ish, like has it like been like like majority of the time, I guess, like people are like it's either like a shoulder, like a knee, like which are the ones that you tend to like injuries or conditions that you tend to see the most
Most.
often? Yeah.
Yeah, I actually built the level 2 course based on the injuries that I in my experience have dealt with the most, and in interacting with trainers, the injuries that trainers have reported that they have to deal with the most with clients, and that's everything that's rotator cuff tendinopathy, kind of as large of an umbrella as that is, low back pain and all the different manifestations of low back pain, definitely knee, so like patellofemoral tendinopathy or patellofemoral syndrome, so any painful knee conditions, and then hip, so hip impingement were the common ones that I see, and then common ones that people are needing to deal with their clients. Like, who has not dealt with a client who was like, oh, like my shoulder hurts and I went to see my doctor and he says I have rotator cuff, la la la, So that and low back is probably the two most common, which is why, for example, the level 1 course is about assessing fundamental movement of the lumbopelvic hip complex and fundamental movement of the shoulder complex, because that's the fundamental movement that you'll need to restore when you're dealing with someone who's had injuries or had pain, low back or shoulder and stuff like that. And then level 2 takes it further to, how do I actually build a rehab periodization for someone who has something going on with their rotator cuff or something going on with their low back or their knee or their hip.
So like we've also like different countries having different kind of like restrictions or like a role of practice, right? I guess like um, I guess like in the States being the biggest one is like if um, you get a lot of trainers that act like they know more about rehab and it's like I guess sometimes like like you can physically try to touch or try to fix issues.
Mm-hmm.
If you get
Mm-hmm.
like, so let's say once um they get into your core like after completing like level one, I guess like what's I guess like what's with the scope of practices and how
Yeah.
can yeah
How can they what? Sorry.
they help more people like I guess in that sense.
Yeah.
After,
Well, scope of practice is an entire different story, and we like I said, in all of our courses we address that. Now, each trainer is responsible for, obviously their own conduct to stay within their scope of practice. But for example, the level one course, as you were asking about that, but also the level two course, all of the assessments in the level one and level two course are assessments that a trainer can do. And we're just teaching people to look at things a little bit differently with a little bit more of a rehab eye, but it's within their scope of practice. And even for therapists who come and take the course, they're still looking at things with a different eye from a movement perspective, for example. So they're coming out of their very clinical assessment more towards a movement assessment, and the therapist is looking at a movement assessment, but gaining some like clinical knowledge out of it. So all of the assessments are accessible whether you're in the scope of practice of a therapist or a trainer. And then all of the interventions are accessible as well, because the interventions are all about exercises and why I would choose a variation of a certain variation of a squat or a deadlift. Why would I choose that variation for this specific person based on what I've seen in the assessment? So you're now taking things that we normally, as a trainer, call a variation of an exercise. And that variation of an exercise now becomes part of my rehab plan because I've selected that variation because that's the behavior that I want to drive. That's the movement that I want to correct. That's the load that I want to control. That's the lever that I want to shorten, whatever it may be. So it's just looking at how you're building your program differently, because now you have an understanding of what the painful syndrome is, what triggers pain, what you need to protect, how much you can expose it, and how you progress that. So it really is all about that structure, and in what order do I do things based on what I've seen in my assessment is also a big part of the course. So there's a strategy on what I'm going to do in my mobilization sequence, what I'm going to do in my activation sequence, and then what I'm going to do in my integration. How am I going to build the training program? How am I going to load that individual?
okay. So yeah, because like I mean like yeah, sometimes you just see that people are kind of like rehab age focused too much, and then it's very hard to integrate to the program. Like so that's why like well for me personally, it's like I ideally I'm not too um good in the rehab part. So like if there needs out, I'm kind of outsourcing that out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But sometimes there's a way. So sometimes a client will come to you and say, well, my therapist gave me this exercise, right? Like say, for example, something for the rotator cuff. And what I always say is, that exercise is not going to be intense enough to create like a stimulus for adaptation, right? It's meant to just specifically rehab the tissue. It's meant to reactivate the rotator cuff. It's meant to address muscle inhibition that's going on there, things like that. So as you say, sometimes people get too focused on rehab, and then what happens is that there's no intensity, right? So people get underloaded, which is why we need to merge the two. So when you're working with a client who's been given those kind of exercises, the idea for a trainer is to say, well, okay, I'm going to take those exercises and we're going to integrate them into a portion of your warm-up sequence. And then based on what I know about let's say it's supraspinatus tendinopathy, or it's a supraspinatus muscle that's irritated. Based on what you know of that, and how pain is triggered when it's the supraspinatus that's irritated, then you're going to select your exercises so that you can avoid triggering pain, right? You can avoid.
Oops, sorry guys. Let's see how it goes. Okay,
Still
sorry,
there?
for a bit. So
Oh, can you hear me?
yeah.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, so that's the kind of collaboration I'm talking about. So necessarily, you may not have um, picked out the specific therapeutic exercise. You may have a client who comes to you and says, "Well, I'm seeing a therapist, and they've given me this to do every day, but I still want to train. So what are you going to do to adjust your training?" And because you want to adjust your training, you're potentially going to have to redo your own assessment. You're not going to want to just be like, "Oh, okay, so we'll do this, that." You still want to have your own vision and understanding of what triggers their pain, how they move, because that's going to help you say, okay, well, I'm not going to give them any horizontal pulling with a wide pronated grip, because that's going to set them off. So instead, I'm going to modify, and we're going to do narrow supinated grip bent over rows, for example. I'm just throwing out examples. But so understanding the injury is an important part of being able to modify what you do in your training. If you don't have that understanding of that injury, you know, you're not going to understand how to modify the training and how to progress them back either. Because it's about loading the tissue but not exceeding its tolerance, and then progressively loading it more and more, which we're used to doing, but with healthy people who don't have pain, right? It's the same thing, but we're just going to have different limitations.
Have you found that there are certain like exercises that uh, most likely would lead to more the exercise that is done wrongly most of the time? I guess the simplest way of saying it.
I mean, I guess there are some. Like I wouldn't want people to understand that as thinking that there are bad exercises, because technically there are no, and there's exceptions. I'm gonna say that right off the bat. Obviously, there are exceptions, but technically, it's not that there are bad exercises. It's just that any exercises that you do wrong is potentially bad for you, right? So it's more about what are the exercises that are most often done wrong, because people don't have the appropriate understanding. Usually it's things like deadlift. That's an exercise I see done wrong a lot of the time, and where people don't have an actual understanding of what the hinge is. I'm talking about your gen pop, probably a lot of overhead movements, because oftentimes people jump into that kind of stuff with group trainings and things like that. But any exercise that's not done properly, or anytime you're jumping into something without having progressed appropriately, is potentially going to be problematic.
So yeah, I agree. Like yeah, deadlifts, especially like and then it's also like kind of like I mean, for trainers, like more for kind of like the ego-ish kind of thing. Right? I can always do more, and then whether like how tired you are, and then potentially leading to more injuries, because there's so many things you need to remember, like keep the stomach tight, all these various things. Yeah, same like it's hip hinge, right? It's one of the exercises that's the most easily forgotten how to do for gen pop clients. Like push your hips back, Okay, so how do you and in the businesses, like how long did it take for you to eventually come up with your own like content for
Stuff.
it? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a work in progress. So I started, with posting on Instagram. Like I said, my courses are relatively new. Like the level 1 course has been out for probably a year and a half now, maybe. Um, but as I said, I've had business endeavors in the past where we've built courses. So building a course is nothing new. Really, it was about trying to put on paper and trying to share with people how I think, how I strategize when I want to intervene with someone. Of course, outside of the clinic, and a lot of my practice has been outside of the clinic as well. So, I wanted the education to be accessible to therapists, yes, who, have the time, work in the context where they can take the time to support someone throughout their entire rehab process, or for trainers who are interested, because I think that they can fill an important gap. So really, it was just about trying to think about, based on the education that I have, having studied athletic therapy, but also, exercise science, obviously, and having worked in gyms most of my life, how is it that I approach assessing someone and then building my intervention? And it was pulling all that out of my head and putting all that on paper. So there's foundational theory that doesn't belong to me. That's that's theory. There's anatomy. There's functional anatomy. There's that kind of stuff. Understanding the basic fundamental theories behind how I strategize to intervene with a client, and then the rest, the strategy, is really trying to share, in my experience, this is what I've been doing with clients for the past 20 plus years, and this is what has worked well for me. So here's the strategy that I use, and here's trying to give you a view of how I think, like how my brain works when I'm analyzing what I'm seeing and how I'm going to intervene on it. So it's trying to put that 20 years of experience into an educational course to share with people who are interested in building a rehab process for their clients.
I like to ask, especially because it's your take on more of the functional training element type of things. Because what's your take on that, I guess?
If you go back to maybe early 2000s, the fad was to say that functional training had to be movement that looks like everyday life. So everything had to look like everyday life. So like bench pressing wasn't functional because in everyday life you don't lie on your back and push weights and stuff like that. And I think, we all saw it that way at the time, and most people have moved away from that now. So I think it's a term that we throw out, and what does it mean? What does it mean that it's supposed to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if what you're doing is getting you to your objectives, if what you're doing is responding to the need, if what you're doing is meeting what you're trying to do, meeting the goal, then it is functional, and so for me, it's difficult to say this is functional training versus this is not. I get clients who do bodybuilding, so they're going to do a lot of isolation work. They're going to do a lot of, and I'm not going to say that's not functional. I mean, that's what works for them, because that's the best way to meet their goals, which is to have the most muscle mass and definition possible, and balance and things like that. And really, what I want to say is that a lot of people who came in the functional training era, who started training in that era, kind of learned things backwards. They never learned to isolate a muscle. They never learned to, they jumped right into combination movements. So right away, I'm doing squat and presses, or, I'm doing kettlebell swings, and I never even learned a hinge, So really doing the non-functional or like conventional sort of training has its advantages that we kind of lost when we moved into this functional training where everything has to be very complex, full body movement based. And people hadn't even learned to understand their own body, which is something that the conventional bodybuilding style training really provides, right?
So I mean, when you mentioned like type of let's say clients or athletes they come to see you, right? Like in this sense, like do let's say bodybuilders or powerlifters come in with more issues?
Do bodybuilders come in with issues?
Or who has more issues? You know, like bodybuilders or powerlifters?
Um, I mean, I wouldn't know an exact statistics.
Mm.
I've had both come to see me with, different kind of problems, right? So, I wouldn't say necessarily one more than the other. Maybe I'm more likely to get a power lifter, but I do have a lot of bodybuilders that have come with issues as well, for sure. Yeah.
And since like you know this year has been due to the pandemic, like do you think that it's been harder for, especially if your line of practice, to do it from home? I guess coaching
Um,
from home.
Yes and no, because we have a really great setup for, I was doing online coaching way before the pandemic internationally. So we have an exercise library. So there's videos of all the exercises that I need people to do. And a lot of my assessments I can do via video. So not 100%, but a good percentage of what I do can be done online. So is it tricky? Yes. But if you have the right technology and the right tools, then you're certainly able to do that. Yeah, we my husband was saying we're actually launching our own app.
Ooh.
Yeah, to do everything essentially online. So there's stuff coming up. Like we're full of projects, like some memberships so that people can use the app and all of the exercise library and the assessments and that kind of stuff to do stuff from a distance as efficiently as possible. We understand that when we do things online, it's not perfect, but it certainly can be optimal if we have all the right tools in place.
Mm.
Yeah.
So, one random question is that like, what have you learned? What's been the one biggest thing you've learned so far this year?
That you need to be like solution driven because this industry is tough already. Like my own journey was tough, go back to early 2000s. It was tough to, it was difficult to make a living because, if you wanted to have an office in a gym or in a studio and see clients and do the kind of hybrid therapy and training, well, you needed to pay for that office, which was usually a lot of money per month. In order to be able to pay that much money per month, you needed to have clients and have revenue. And so, it's a difficult industry. And now with COVID and everybody not knowing what's going to happen and how long it's going to last and how much, I think you need to be solution oriented and be like, what is it that I can do online? And how can I make it optimal? And like I said before, we know it's not going to be perfect because that one-on-one interaction with a client is always going to be better than through a screen. But it can be optimal. If you have the right tools, if you have everything set so that you can best support your client, it's doable. So I think the biggest thing that I learned this year was turning around quickly and saying, okay, well, how can we adapt to this instead of just sitting back and saying, well, we're going to wait till the storm passes and we can see clients again. So, and a lot of that is education to the clients as well, because clients are going to say, well, I guess I'll just cancel all my appointments until I can see you in person again. And so you have to be like, well, here's what I can do for you from a distance, and have them see the value of continuing, online. So turning that around, I'm proud that we actually did that fairly quickly because, you know, now in the business there's myself, but I have two other therapists. At the time of the pandemic in March, I had one other therapist working with me. And we, you know, so the initial week or two, it was like, oh, well, I guess we're not seeing clients anymore. And then, you know, realizing that, wait a minute, you know, I've been doing online coaching internationally for so, like, we can continue online coaching. So reach out to all your clients and, you know, let them know we can do stuff online. And we ended up, you know, after those first initial weeks where it kind of went a little quieter, it came back up again and we saw clients, like we saw a bunch of clients online. So, you know, I guess trying to quickly find solutions is probably the biggest lesson this year, because nobody's going to remember anything else about 2020 except COVID.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, Big Hot
yeah.
Real that he got just put onto Rehab U recently and he loves it. So he's saying that you are great at what you do. So.
Ah, thank you. Yes, I know Big Rod. He's waiting for his double X large t-shirt. Hi, Rodney. He was like, "Can I get a Rehab U t-shirt?" And I was like, "Yeah, but what size are you?" And he's like, "Double X large." I was like, "I'm gonna have to order some. I'm gonna have to order some more."
Yeah.
Does anybody have questions? If I can see the chat a little bit at the bottom, maybe some of mine disappear. So if ever there were questions higher up, but if anyone has questions, I think we can answer some as well.
Haven't had any yet. So just going like, especially in like your line of work, like I mean, for me, I see that like generally it's probably in the fitness industry, it can be much harder for females most of the time because it's very male dominated environment.
Hmm.
Then now, especially coming into like the rehab-ish element, like do you see it more being male focused, male dominated, or is there much more open to female in that sense?
I think that bringing rehab into the gyms is potentially gonna open the door to more females in a typically male industry, perhaps. I you know, I get that question a lot, and I always find it a little bit hard to answer because I kind of haven't felt that so much in the sense that I've always been, you know, I don't know, as a kid I was a tomboy. I've always, you know, I've always done really well in the industry. Um, I mean, I think, are there potentially more like very high quality female uh, therapists, potentially, you know. Um, I think that really what it's about for the female is it's about making sure that you put forward a lot of knowledge, a lot of education, a lot of, you know, um, to gain that recognition of, you know, your talent and your place in in the industry, if that answers your question.
Uh, like for me, I think it's like how should I say? I see that like just because also I guess in general like it started with men being able to go to the gym first, and then later on it continue with females. So like culture wise, it's so much of a male environment, and like
Yeah.
females. I'm not sure the right way to say, but like sometimes have a lesser voice because um, it's just generally much more male dominated. That's what I thought. So yeah, that's why
Yeah. Yeah.
mm,
Yeah. And you know, maybe um, females need to be more outspoken and not, you know, not be shy to speak out and get out there and share the knowledge. You know, like I said, I don't feel it so much as a, you know, I think the industry is a difficult industry to stand out in, regardless you're a female or a male. You know, so there are easy social media ways to stand out, like posting, you know, stuff that grabs the eye, so to speak. And then there are ways of standing out that will gain you a lot of respect because you're actually sharing knowledge and brains and you know, with the honest intention of helping trainers and people get better at what they do.
I think that yeah, it's just that one tends to be slower, and then but everybody likes everything to be much more instant nowadays, right? So like like you mentioned, it took you years to get to where you are at.
Mm-hmm.
Most people like I want it there like in days or months. Like, you know, like I want 1 million Instagram followers like tomorrow. If it can happen tomorrow, awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I
so I
it's
think
funny because I um I always joke around that like it took us some amount of time and a lot of work to gain the following that we have. But it, you know, it's a following that we got by sharing, you know, quality information, if I may say so myself, versus sometimes I run into Instagram accounts that have nothing educational at all to share, but have 6 million followers, and I'm always like, oh man, what's wrong with this world? But anyway, I guess it's just we're doing it for different reasons, right? And reaching different people probably.
so can I guess like you can also can speak a little bit more like what like we can go more into detail like your level one course, and then
Hmm.
also like the places where you intend to go next year, or the countries.
Uh, yes. So the level one course, again, as I was saying earlier, is accessible to. We have therapists that come through. We have trainers that come through. It really is about fundamental optimization. So remember earlier we were talking about what is it that we deal with the most? That's um, issues, low back
Sorry,
pain issues,
just
and
before.
are you okay? Have I lost you?
Can you hear?
On and off.
Can you hear me now, Mai?
Yes. Yes. A little bit.
Okay.
Okay. There's a little bit of a lag, but you there?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So yeah. So the level one course is really about assessing and then restoring fundamental movement of the shoulder complex, of the hip complex. Because regardless of someone has had an injury, has had pain for many years, or is struggling with their overhead lifts, or is struggling with their deadlifts or lower body lifts, potentially what you'll find if you regress enough is you'll find that there's some sort of perturbed function in the natural movement, or what should be the natural movement of the lumbopelvic hip complex and of the shoulder complex. So the scapula on the thorax and that integration with the shoulder joint. So being able to assess that and address that is usually the first part, or is the first part. I shouldn't say usually. For me, that's always the first part. So like being able to assess what should it look like, what are the common things that you'll see that don't look right, and then how am I going to address that using the mobilization, the activation, the integration. So the movement optimization strategy that I introduce in the level one course and that we build upon in the level two course. So there's going to be, you know, specific exercises for specific issues that you find. So for example, if you're looking at the shoulder and you find that there's scapular instability and things like that, there's going to be specific exercises to target that and bring awareness to that. And then there's going to be, how do I modify my training based on what's going on at the shoulder at that time? And we know it's not static. The person will get better and will improve, but what do I modify in my training so that I can make sure that I'm going to restore? I'm not allowing them to get into compensations. and I can fix and restore that fundamental movement, but I can still get them loaded. So they're not being underloaded. I'm not just saying to them, don't do any overhead work. So just do horizontal pushing and pulling. You know, there's variations that they probably can do that will be okay. So that, you know, that's kind of what the thinking is about. And, you know, I mean, I have to say 100%, or I've never, you know, the only ever feedback I've gotten on the level 1 course is like, wow, I walked out of there and on the Monday I was already applying stuff. Or I walked out of the course and I just wanted to reassess all of my clients so that I could start to apply the strategy. So it's very, it's very practically applicable, and there's a huge practical portion to the course as well. So you come out on the Sunday evening, and then on the Monday you're ready to, you know, start putting into application. And there's flexibility in the strategy. It's not like here's something new and you have to apply it like by the letter. It's very much about here's a different way of thinking of how you're going to build your intervention. But the tools that you put within the strategy are whatever the tools are that you have, that you are used to working with. It's just that now you have a different objective that you're trying to meet. So you're seeing it from a little bit of a different eye. So that's, in a nutshell, the level 1 course.
Okay. And as you start, I travel starts next year, hopefully. Like you mentioned, you're going
you're
to
breaking out.
ideally Australia, Asia.
And it keeps cutting.
Okay, never mind. So let me type. Let me. Let me mention Asia.
Oh, yes. Yep. You can hear me, right? Okay, so we, in 2021, it's a little bit, it's complex because we have 2020 courses that got postponed and then pushed back to 2021, but places that we should be going in 2021, if all goes well, are France, Ireland, Asia, Belgium. I think that's off the top of my head. the different places that we have courses scheduled to happen.
Okay. I
think I can hear you now.
Yes. Can you hear me?
But yeah.
Okay.
It's a bit on and
I
off,
guess
but yeah.
Before internet connection gets worse, or hopefully it doesn't get worse, like I guess we can end it here. I just got get like, where do people find you?
Yes. So on Instagram, Mai Rehab U. Facebook as well. So our Facebook page is Mai Rehab U. And of course the website, rehabu.com, is a great reference because there's tons of stuff on the website that you can access. So we have the blog with like over 50 articles, educational articles. And I was mentioning earlier, it's always like, I want people to read the article and be able to get something that they're like, I can apply this practically, you know. And there are, you know, there's free videos. There's just so much information on the website. Of course, you can go and look at the Level 1 course detailed agenda as well via the website if you want a little bit more information on the Level 1 course.
Okay.
We also have a YouTube channel now as well. So join that as well. Subscribe to that as well.
Okay, I guess. So before internet connection gets worse, I guess like that's it for today.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And also thank you for confirming your being a presenter for the Women's Summit.
Yes, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
Andrew, I just saw a couple people. Hi, Satish. Hi, Ryan. We're actually leaving. Is this going to be on? Are you going to put it on your IGTV, Melvin?
I'm gonna I'm gonna put it up and then I'll download it and I can even send it if you want to put it on YouTube or anything.
Awesome. Sounds good. So people can rewatch if they want.
Yeah. Thank you.
All
Thank you.
right. Thanks.
Bye
Take
bye.
care.
See you.
Bye.